oh, why me? He told me that you can be very provocative. So I have to pay for my tea, I guess. So one thing I'm beginning to feel I'm more at a sort of, this is more reaction to Goan cuisine. So I hope the other two speakers will contest, and you of course take a distinctly feminist position because Sumedha has blamed all these ladies for the loss of our kitchen. Thank you. Now we'll hear Savia.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here because I'm a fan of Fatima Gracias' writing. Whether it was health and hygiene or her books on women, I've really enjoyed them hugely. And because I wanted to have a pre-release opportunity, I actually smuggled home a book of Cozinha de Goa, cuisine or Goan kitchen. And I tell you, I didn't sleep last night. So if I doze in between, friends, just forgive me that little lapse. You know why it was. Fatima's research makes the familiar strange, and in doing so, it opens up the space for critical evaluation. If someone had called me earlier for an opening of a book on Goan cooking, I would have said no, outright in my younger days, because I hated this blighting of Goans being cooks, tailors, and butlers. I remember once, to give you a small anecdote, a cousin of mine who had come for his cardiology exams in Bombay, and myself, studying my undergraduate studies in college, were traveling back on the steamer. This was the time of the hippies coming to Goa. And there was this lovely looking Frenchman with long hair who got pally with us, and he says, "There are Goans like you. I thought there were only cooks and butlers." My cousin was the quiet one. So I turned round and said, "Well, that's not unusual. Maybe you have met with only those." But now, being older and less swift of tongue and more prone to reflection, I think I look back and think of the two spaces, the virtual, not the virtual spaces, the actual spaces of my growing up. The cour, the cuisine, and the dispensa. And I realize what fecund spaces they were. They were the places where you learned a lot, even though you had your formal schooling in a school. These were places inhabited by women, where women's power games took place, where cooking took place at the same time. And as tiny kids, you learned a lot of things about managing house, growing up, feeding, food, and everything. The dispensa where all the family food was kept, I remember, was my shrink room as a child. It was the space where I ran away when my mother shouted at me. And you were surrounded by things that had grown, that were growing, that were part of the activity and the flurry of an old ancestral house. Mats for laying out the rice in season, the rice in storage which was to be used for the next planting season, sweet potatoes, watermelons, bibinkas kept in the corner because there were no fridges at that time. You name it, dosh, pinagr, everything. Not all together, of course, as we are prone to do now. But sometimes when there were festivities in the home, your mother would call you and say, "Today's the day you have to use the rogodo." And the rogodo was a thing that, you know, you ground the rice flour on, and it was a chore, to say the least, because you had to keep on in a motion of taking it round and round, round and round, till the grainy rice was powder thin. Luckily for me, when growing up, I had these two boy cousins, and unlike my other cousins at home, I would enjoy playing cricket with them. And how was cricket played at home? It was played with old socks put together to make a tight ball, and your cricket bat was the coconut tree, palm tree end. So between, yeah, pido, the pido. So in between grinding, you would be the minder in the field, because you would be only given the fielding jobs. The two cousins were the batsmen and the bowlers, you see. So in my childhood, I constantly rejected this idea of feminization, of being the cook in the family. And wanted to have other pursuits which Goa couldn't offer. So I went out of that space, the ancestral home space, didn't want to get married and have dozens of kids and 25 grandkids, as my preceding speaker has rightly pointed out. So I said, I must study. I don't want to be a cook, tailor and butler. But now, having come back 5 years to stay here, last year I had a very bad tryst with life. I had a heart attack, which was almost fatal. I almost died. And then I said, something's going wrong with my body. You know, I'm not eating the right food. And so we started a reversal at home. We went back to the old traditional recipes. We still make your bakri at home. We still make your koilorio at home. We still use brown rice now as a reversal, and I think it gives you a second life. So some of these traditional recipes really help you cope with your environment. Our cooking is, like Fatima has rightly pointed out, it's local. But you have to be a locavore most of the time. You can be local some of the time, not all the time. But you have to be a locavore. So this time recently, my son came home. I have a 30-year-old son. He came home and he brought a huge sack with him. And I was wondering just what he brought. So he said, that's something for the house. I couldn't contain my curiosity, so I went back. And I looked at it. It was the rice grains of my childhood, kendar and hensaro, if you remember what that is. The traditional rice, brown rice varieties which we would grow locally, which is now being substituted by Jyoti and Jaya. So I said, what's this in aid of? He says, you know what? From this year onwards, we are going to cultivate our rice fields again. Thank you.